All right, let's get the show on the road, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. And tonight's a special episode, of course, made more special by the fact that we're doing it with friends. That's right, everybody. We've got a couple of great friends to the channel who are going to join us tonight as we talk about the original, the 1982 classic, sci-fi classic, TRON, and try and answer the question, does it hold up 40 years later? That's right. Summer 1982, this film came out. And we're going to see if we can't answer that question, whether we're in agreement or not. And we may be in disagreement. But first, let me give you the background to this film before I bring on my co-host with the most, plus our awesome friends of the channel. Where are my show notes? Here we are. Okay, this flick was pretty cool when we first saw it on the big screen back in 1982. Here is the log line from IMDb, and I think it's one of the best log lines I've read in a long time. Or maybe I've had a bit of a good run of log lines. Anyway, from IMDb, a computer hacker is abducted into the digital world and forced to participate in gladiatorial games where his only chance of escape is with the help of a heroic security program. It was directed by Steven Lisberger, screenplay by Steven Lisberger and Charles S. Haas, although I believe there's a bit of shall I say, drama behind that. The story is from a story based or written by Steven Lisberger and Bonnie McBird. Of course, it stars Jeff Bridges, Bruce Boxleitner, David Warner, and Cindy Morgan, who you may remember from our coverage of Caddyshack. She played Lacey Underall in that flick. It also stars Bernard Hughes and Dan Shore. Let's go over to the social nutrition checklist, everybody. Now, would this thing have picked up a reframe stamp? No, it would not have. That was never going to happen. It was union made. It was a big Disney picture, Hollywood picture, so it was union made. Would it pass the Bechdel test? Did it pass the Bechdel test? No, it did not. Is it a class-conscious film? No. So that gives it a score of 25%. Given that it was made in 1982, yeah, this is not a big shocker. Okay, from that, let's... I do want to talk, folks, about what I like to call the historicity. And for this film, you got to remember, like, I guess, is it historically accurate? I'm not, I don't know if we can really call it that, but did it capture its time? I think it really did. You got to remember, so summer of 1982, this film comes out, and then, and then the, oh my goodness, this just does not want to, my gizmo doesn't want to cooperate all of a sudden. Oh my goodness, this is just not working out. Time actually names the personal computer the machine of the year. It isn't a person of the year, or back in the 80s, man of the year. It was the computer. And so we had a video game craze going on, and computers were kind of just all the buzz. Does my kid need to know the computering skills to get a job? Is this the future? Like plastics in a different era. Anyway, what I did do is, and down in the description, you'll find I pulled a bunch of quotes or a bunch of links. One is to the original Disney making of documentary. I think it was shot in either the 90s or the early aughts for one of their big, like either a big video or big DVD release. There's also a link to the documentary Atari Game Over, which is ostensibly about the quote worst video game ever made, close quote, the making of the Atari ET video game, but it really does, I think, do a great, like it interviews a lot of the people involved in Atari and some of these other game makers, and that really kind of captures that time. There's also an awesome interview Lisberger, the director, did in The Guardian, talking about what a unique film this was and its impact, at least from the writer and the directors on cinema after that, at least in their opinion. And last but certainly not least, you could see I was having a hard time with the gizmo. The Soul of a New Machine. This book came out, and there's a link to its Wikipedia article, and of course you can read it. I remember reading this. I was super into computers at the time, and that you could say any of my tech stuff, even now, is really born of that original interest. And this was a book, I want to say it might have been a guy that Jim and I hung out with a bit in the 80s, or it might have been one of my high school friends, but it is about an engineering team trying to create a mini computer to compete with Digital Equipment Corporation's VAX, which was this big deal mini computer. Anyway, it really kind of captures a spirit of innovation and how few people were actually involved in creating some of this stuff that is now, you can't say, notwithstanding the way we idolize and, it's almost like to a disturbing degree, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, no one is inventing any of this stuff anymore. No one's creating it. That's just not happening. But there was a time when a lot of this stuff was very small groups of people, and so you can really get an idea of that spirit. So I strongly recommend this. And again, another one where it was made in and of that time. So you can kind of see where Tron fits in the zeitgeist of the late 70s and early 80s. So with that out of the way, I think it's time to bring my co-host, Mr. Jim Chaboyko, along with Cody Brockopp from the Brockopp Side, and last but certainly not least, the man, the myth, the legend, Dragon Movie Guy. Cody, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Like I mentioned non-verbally a minute ago, it's been a while since I've watched the original Tron, but I've always had a real fascination within just the franchise period, so it was fun to get to revisit it for the sake of this live stream, so it should be a good time.
Awesome. Brian, how are you doing? How are you doing, man?
Great. Just middle of checking out videos and doing all my top 10 August video stuff. So,
and do you want to give us a teaser? What's the give us one of the films, preferably not the top one. Give us a film that you think we should be excited about this in August.
Well, the last couple of years there's been a movement, if you will, to have Asian movies or Asian American movies or Asian descended movies come out in August. And there's another one coming out this month, actually this Friday, called, oddly, Easter Sunday. And it's based off a guy who grew up in Seattle and who now lives in Vegas, just like I did. There's a stand-up comedian named Joe Coy, who is Filipino American. And so it's about him and his family and Filipino culture. And apparently he says that Easter Sunday is Super Bowl Sunday for the Filipino community. So that's number 4 on my list for August.
That sounds pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. Thanks for sharing that. Might have to put it on our list, Jim.
Yes, yeah.
Jim, you just got in from the lake. You're good otherwise? Like,
Yeah, I need a shower, but I can take care of that later. So if
All
you
right.
see flop sweat, it's just I got too much sun, whatever.
yeah.
He's all greased up and ready to go.
Oh, that's so bad. All right, we already got folks. We got an active, got folks active in the chat wanting to talk about this film. But I do think it behooves us, of course, as we all know, David Warner, who had a dual role in this film, recently passed away. And Jim, you can say a few words maybe about Mr. Warner.
Yeah. Whenever somebody like David Warner passes away, especially a longtime performer, I realize that I've been watching this guy most of my movie watching life. And I don't know about you, Rob, but in the 70s and 80s, he basically had a royal flush, if not more. He was in big miniseries like Masada and Holocaust. He was in Tron, obviously, which was one of those. He basically was a checklist of every movie that a 12-year-old boy would want to see. Time Bandits, and probably
Yes.
the one that I the most remember, and he wasn't a bad guy in this one, was those infamous Omen movies, and he was in the first one. And I think that's probably where I saw him first. And my class was fascinated we would talk about it after school because it was basically a fight against the devil. And a lot of the characters, spoiler alert, 2, 3, met grisly deaths. And he was actually what we would now call a helper. And so he was helping Gregory Peck's character in that first movie. But he was also one of the first guys that I recognized, one of the first English performers, that big long face, his accent. He got a start at RADA.
And his imposition.
Yeah,
like his
and just
imposing
yeah.
presence.
And he, of course he played a lot of bad guys, but he's one of those guys that when he's not playing a bad guy, you really learn to appreciate him a little more. And so in The Omen, I was like, oh, he was a sort of a hippie photographer. But he got a start at RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, played Hamlet in the 60s, went up through the Royal Shakespeare Theater there, and really established himself. Was in totally high profile. That he played all kinds of bad guys. He played Jack the Ripper. He played Richard Heydrich. And then even up until a few years ago, he was Kenneth Branagh's father in Wallander, in the Wallander series, his stern Danish, Swedish painter father. So it's just somebody that a face that I've grown up with. And we're all getting old together. And when one of these guys passes away, it sort of makes you just think about, his effect on your life. But yeah, super versatile. He played 3 different races and 3 different Star Trek appearances. He was a Klingon. He was a Cardassian. Yeah, sorry. And a human. And interestingly, and I didn't really realize this till later, he had been diagnosed with cancer about a year and a half ago, and he passed away in something called Danville Hall, which is it's a retired theatrical performers residence that I guess when somebody gets sick or they need care, they have them in the States, they have them in LA. But it's a 16th century mansion, and that's where he passed away. So great career, just sort of a cheers to Mr. Warner, and look at his filmography. You're gonna want to watch half of it, guaranteed.
Folks, for one of the documentaries, I believe it was the official Disney making of, Bernard Hughes was being interviewed. Like they had all talked about all the cast they were interviewing talked about their experience with David Warner. And this is, when he was still amongst the living. But Bernard Hughes, his chat about him is not just how imposing it was, but what a reputation he had. And he's talking about this in the 90s or in the aughts about a gig in the early 80s. They said even then people were still talking about his Hamlet performance. Apparently that was like amongst those, old school theater folks, that was still like a chef's kiss performance that all these that preceded him in every role he took on,
Yeah. No, it's quite a career. Sorry, just win some water. We just went down the wrong way. Sorry. That was not accurately professional. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jim, for doing that for us. Really appreciate it. And everyone, you know what? If you have anything you wanted to chime in on David Warner, like maybe one of your favorite roles of his, your first memory, mention it in the chat, or put a comment. Put a comment if you're watching this, listening to this in a replay. That's very cool. And thanks again, Jim. Really appreciate you doing that for us. Okay, I am now, though, before we get into the movie, let us, let's bring on the best chat on the internet. Say hello to everyone. Okay, we already have, it looks like we got Matt David Boren from the land down under. It's so bad.
Western Australia.
Everything's upside down there.
We've got Richard L. No sound from guests. And but we have Richard L. and Katie Fowler, I'm sure, is around. Awesome to see you guys. And of course, I'm going to shamelessly kind of bite in. It's great to see everybody here. And it looks, I think, according to the stats, we've got a few lurkers. So if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. But if you just want to kind of enjoy the show and enjoy the chat, fill your boots. All right, let's get into the movie now. Now, as I was saying before, folks, I think given the nature of this film and where it sits in special effects history, a number of other things that were going on in it, I do think it's worthwhile bringing back a full version of The Craft, but pre-spoilers. So if you guys can just talk about The Craft, but not spoiler stuff, and we'll save that for when we're talking about story and the meaning of the film, I'd appreciate it. Why don't who wants to go first? Jim,
I can.
Ding, ding, ding.
Sure, I'll just say a few words. It still looks amazing, like the close, especially when they're in that inner space, that the computer world.
Yeah.
And I sort of love, and I don't know if you guys got this as well, but the way they film their faces, it was almost like a sort of a rotoscoping, or they superimposed color on top of a black and white film. I got a distinct silent movie kind of vibe from it, just in the way that they sort of used their faces and the shades, I guess, rather than the colors. And even there's a shot of Dillinger coming in on a helicopter, and they even sort of troned that up. It's in the real world, but the helicopter's all outlined in red, so it sort of carries through a little bit. But just what a look. I'll pass it on to you guys, but I did want to ask you if you guys got like that sort of silent, almost, if you've ever watched a silent movie, science fiction movie, like, something futuristic. I sort of got that kind of beat from it.
That's an interesting point, Jim. Actually, and I learned this in one of the documentaries I've linked. It's more like they did it animated. They did shoot it in black and white, and then they kept taking, like, there's some scenes that may have had 27 separate passes, like rephotograph with this filter, rephotograph with that filter. So it has a composite, as they make these like 27 plates to give those colors the pop they had. But yeah, they were shot in black and white just to get the contrast they needed, and then they added on top of that. So all their back, like they, of course there were painted sets. There were also, you can see in a couple, it's like that office scene, which was a great matte painting. But any in the digital world, they were either painted in grayscale and then just built up in really photo, like not as much CGI as photochemical optical special effects. So I think that may, and it's got that sepia look that you saw in some colorized or two color, like early silent film, early film attempts. So I think that may be what you were talking about.
I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but yeah, that sort of tracks.
Brian.
Well, it kind of struck me, and maybe it's just time and place for me, but I kept thinking of Star Wars, like the original A New Hope, because, and I could be wrong about this, but in the original A New Hope, when they did the lightsaber effect, they had a reflective surface, and that's what they used to paint the lightsaber colors over. And I thought that that's what they used in Tron, like on their sleeves and everything, to give the blue and the red coloring effects. And that it may just be a stylistic similarity, but I believe they were using something similar to that for all the red and
colored
blue
filters when they were reshooting it. So they shot black and white, super high contrast. Where they wanted color, like on their white suits, they would draw in black marker. And then, so it becomes really easy to, easy, let's put air quotes on that, easy to mask. And then you shoot it again, but you've got a filter over it. So certain things will just come out in that. And that's one of the things I guess they were saying, Lisberger was saying, it's like, wow, we're getting colors we would never get. No one's seen that, like some of those oranges and that hype, like super saturated is almost not strong enough a word. Like colors you'd never see. It's really quite fascinating how they were, in a way, maybe not breaking ground, but pushing the envelope for optical effects, even as they were bringing in digital effects, like actual visual, what we call VFX now.
Well, and you could really tell, like it. I think it holds up really well from the special effects side, but there were times where, like when they're doing the skybeam thing, and the AI's CGI kind of curvature over the beam, you could kind of tell the separation between the two, like with 2020 hindsight. But I think it holds up really well.
Cody.
Well, for me, this movie, it's a very interesting time capsule, I guess is the way I would describe it, because I think everyone's kind of touched on at this point how it was very much trying to push the envelope as far as visual effects are concerned, and which is something I will always like commend the movie for, because it was one of the earliest attempts at using digital a very crude form of CGI. So it's one of those things where it's like it's almost like deep fake, or like the de-aging effects nowadays, where it's like the first little bit there, it's like it's not believable, but it keeps getting better and better as time goes on. So it's kind of a similar thing here, where it's like maybe not every single piece of it holds up to today's standards, of course, but it's important, because if they didn't try it then, it wouldn't be as good as it is nowadays. And what I also find fascinating about it is like talking about the matte paintings and just the overall visual style of the world. I really like it because even though sometimes it kind of looks like the cover of like a math textbook, with its bright colors and its geometry and all that, it also just kind of fascinates because it's supposed to be like a video game world come to life, where circa 1982, the most powerful gaming system around was like the Magnavox Odyssey, which had, credit card sized cartridges and all that. So now, it was almost like a preview of where that technology could go in the future, which it basically did. And I could definitely imagine being like, 10 years old watching this movie for the first time when it was brand new and just being absolutely mesmerized uh, by that. And it's just one of those movies, kind of like the first Star Wars, where it's like, it really is an achievement in a lot of ways because it kept trying and tried to push things forward. And I think we should be thankful for that.
Yeah. I Jim, how old were you? I was
Hmm.
15 when I saw this flick. Like it
Yeah, I was probably right or maybe a little younger.
like you saw it when it came out though, is what I like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I believe I did see it in the movie theater. I don't recall the circumstance, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it would have been right up my alley. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, I'm thinking about for those of you who don't know, Jim and I, off and on have grown up together to a degree. When we were younger, in our early to mid teens, hung out with a neighbor, like somebody who lived in our neighborhood, was a computer programmer, had a Commodore PET and a ColecoVision,
yeah,
which was the shit as far as home video game systems, and a
Was
ton
that
of
the Commodore
cartridges.
64?
Hmm?
Was that the Commodore 64?
ColecoVision? Like, I mean, the thing I called a different thing? No,
You said you said a Commodore,
Commodore
something
PET.
or other.
a Commodore
Okay.
PET.
Was that the
Pre-
Commodore 64?
That-
I remember
no,
from that era.
yeah, Commodore PET, like 4K, 8K, and then 16K.
ooh,
Yeah, the Commodore 64 was like a jump ahead as far as usability. Yeah, the Commodore PET was in many respects still, wow, we really can do this, and it can do some things. But the Commodore 64 was that first really big, we can make a computer for home that isn't $1 zillion that people at home can actually use to do stuff that they would want to do. Not and yes, play games, but also actually write a letter on their crappy dot matrix printer. The do a spreadsheet, that kind of thing. This was before that, but you could see these things coming. Yeah, I took computer science in one high school. It was punch cards and timeshare on a mainframe. In the other high school, it's the same processor, the 6502, that you found in so many other early personal computers. And so this film came out as all this stuff was kind of blowing up, and everyone was, what does this mean? What did you guys think of the music? I say this because they have a bit of a, there's a number of motifs, and they play it right at the end, and it's a little bit, I first thought soulful, but I'm actually like, sometimes they'll bring that main motif up and play it melancholy. But all I thought then was, it's like, this really was a good script. It doesn't remind me immediately of Vangelis, even though it's a lot of synth and that. Like, but you don't automatically think, Vangelis, and just move on,
part of the problem is I I just watched Thief, Michael Mann's Thief with the late James Caan, and Tangerine Dream does the score for that. So I'm conflating the two scores in my head right now. Kind of similar though.
Yeah. What about
but
what about you guys, Brian?
Well, for me, the score was really interesting because I think scores more than anything. Well, maybe CGI, but musical scores can really sell time and place very well. And being 1982 and being so heavy into the tech with the computer graphics and and the the extensive use of the computer world, that was sort of the futuristic version for 1982. So to have all the synth stuff that we hear as the musical score, and yet still, so that really sells the early 80s time frame, but it also does the real good job of having that melancholy score, as you said. It really does tell that near future sort of time frame for that era really well.
Cody.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Brian, about how it perfectly captures the time period and just the whole vibe of the movie very well because, unlike I don't want to keep making the Star Wars comparison, but the movie I don't think would work with like a more classical John Williams esque score because that's supposed to be a little more on this more timeless, more traditional, and this movie's not necessarily timeless, quote unquote. Uh, it's very much a product of its time with the music, the visual effects, the hairstyles. So it's one of those things where it's like, some may look at it and think, well, it's kind of interesting because, stuff like synth music has, made a bit of a comeback over the past few years. Things come and go in waves. So it's very much a product of the time, and I appreciate it for that. And I think what Daft Punk did with the score in Tron Legacy just took that and cranked it up to 11. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to get into the spoiler zone. And
spoilers, it's not real.
let us, and as we get into the spoiler zone, folks, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and ding that bell. Okay, story-wise, guys, you know what, Cody, why don't you start us off? Is there anything, let me ask you this. I have like a list of questions.
It wasn't me, officer.
We just have a few questions down at the station, down at the story station. Did the story work for you? You like this is something you first saw, I'm assuming, on video. You just resaw it. Does it? Yeah. Did the story work for you?
I think it did ultimately. The thing is with this movie is, unlike everybody else here, it was not a part of my childhood necessarily. I got into it because, Tron Legacy was coming out in 2010, so of course it brought attention back to the original. So I got a real fascination for it. So it's like, oh, so it's like seeing the marketing for the sequel, about, guy who built this incredible game got sucked into it. Now his son's doing the same, and you get to participate in these gladiatorial matches. So it's kind of like I don't want to say it tampered with my perspective on it, but it's like, oh, so the original's like that, but a solid 18 years behind. So I guess kind of having like, okay, I know this idea works and it's cool, and I think it translates well fine from the original on there. So I don't think it. So I feel like it's a very cool concept, getting sucked into a video game and having to fight for your life. I know that's like the most yeah. So it's kind of surface level, but it's like it works, and we've seen it happen multiple times with something as recent as Ready Player One from 2018. So yeah, it worked. Make a long story short.
Brian, I'll bring it over to you. What would you say? Well, first of all, do you agree with Cody? And this is a yes or no. I'm looking for bits answer. Yes, 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 or no, no, no. Did the story work?
Yes.
Okay.
The thing that
no. I'm going to move. I have a question for you. What would you say are the key scenes of the film?
I think one of the ones that really stands out to me is the if anything, it's the Disney character of the bit, the one that was yes, 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 no, no, no.
The fact that it wasn't turned into a thing.
Yeah.
sort of
Well,
blows my mind.
But the thing that
Yeah.
really got me about that was that that was the one kind of Disney-ish character in there,
Yeah.
in a script that was really more Shakespearean and Roman Empire, filled with all this, big allegories of slavery and religion and all that kind of stuff. For being a film that has all this Roman references and everything, ancient Rome, to have a little character like that being the one spark of Disney that was really just pure Disney in there,
Do you
stood out.
do you
And
think
also
that's
trying
why?
to
Oh, yeah.
well, and also trying to a 1982 audience to try and explain computer programming in an era where not many people were programming computers, where it was still high concept in terms of programming computers, and people weren't taking C++ or other computing languages in high schools for the most part.
Yeah. You know what? I think actually it's
point.
perfectly calibrated to its time. You know what? You don't make that movie now. I think it's one of the reasons after Tron Legacy happened, everyone, sure it did well because it had the marketing push. It was slick and everything, but it's not like it was new. They didn't push any new ground. Maybe got a little Buddhist up in our grill, but what I wanted to ask you though is why do you think then, do you think, without getting into the themes, do you think one of the reasons, like it was just a heavier story and therefore that's why the bit was only there a couple of times and they didn't do anything with it? Because there's one character that I'm like, well, he told them to get out of here. So are we meeting him again? No. Like it actually, I want to say when I first saw the movie, that kind of took me out of the movie a little bit. Cause I'm like, oh, we're seeing the bit back. Oh, maybe he's involved with this. Oh, he just, what did he do? Just die? I don't know. Brian?
The question there was,
I asked it. It was, do you think that because of the heavy nature, that's why they never really did anything with the bit? Because they didn't.
Yeah,
they introduce it, then they introduce another one, and then it's just.
Yeah, I think that was the moment of levity, because the film is because it does take things seriously, with everything else in it. I do think that was sort of the wink and the nod that yes, this is a Disney picture. And give something for the kids, because I think on the surface, with the push for all the video games and the product tie-in stuff, clearly this is a film that could have been marketed towards kids, but with all the Shakespearean
And was.
That kind of thing, it was a lot more serious of a film than what we would typically market towards teenagers, I think. So I think to me that was sort of like the bridge of
It was a
trying to make
perfect
it
teen film.
Yeah,
It was a perfect teen film. Children, I think that if you're talking about 7, 8, 9-year-olds, yeah, this would be a tough sell.
When this
more
film
bit.
came out, this film came out when I was 7 years old, but I did not see it in theaters.
Yeah.
So I would have been of that age where going to this film, probably a lot of it would have flown over my head. But the bit thing of the yes, yes, yes,
yeah,
no thing, I think was the one thing in there for kids to kind of try and latch onto to have an entrance into classical Shakespearean whatever.
Yeah. Well, but I want to push back on that. It wasn't for teenagers, because I think that's exactly who they were marketing to. Like this was aimed at teens and young adults. Like hard.
The setting, yes, with the video game arcade and all of that part of the setting, but the way they treat the story, I thought was much more adult. Because when I was 13, 14, I don't remember being involved in Shakespeare at all. I mean, I still hate.
What Shakespeare's here other than David Warner? Where's the soliloquy?
The classical,
come on,
the Roman Empire kind of, we're Hamleting away and
Star Wars. Like, come on, you guys have just referred to Star Wars, which story-wise, this is got a bit of overlap too. Teens got that.
Star Wars is fantasy. It's space fantasy. It's not. It's a space
Oh,
opera. It's not. It's not
bullshit.
Shakespeare.
Bullshit.
Thou shalt not. It's all. It's not to be or not to be.
Okay,
Wherefore
where is this though? This is what I'm asking you, Brian. I never thought, oh, this is very Shakespearean, and the struggle on whether or not the hero will move forward. There is no Hamlet here. It's, oh, I'm in here. I'm trying to find my fucking proof for my shit. There's this other guy who's trying to take over the world, like the Death Star. Like, I don't see this big, high character arc you're talking about.
Well, part of it too might have just been stylistically, because the style of the writing was very, I thought, 60s and 70s feel to how they were presenting the Roman Empire allegory of the computer programming to the people inside the world, inside the computer programming world, with the Shakespeare and the with the slaves fighting each other, sort of what was it, the Michael Douglas's father doing the Spartacus thing.
Kirk Douglas.
That's what it reminded me of. Stylistically, that's what the screenwriting reminded me of, in terms of how they were approaching the computer world. This, the virtual reality, if you will, was being treated as a ancient Rome sort of a set. From the 60s
you know what?
and 70s.
I think you might be
That's how it struck me,
pushing,
at least.
like they really leaned into that kind of vibe in the, like there was the bread in the circus games aspect in Tron Legacy, but other than they were gladiatorial games, there's no audience. We learn pretty early on that it's really this character breaking these programs for the MCP's purposes of taking over. Do you know what I mean? Like, because otherwise there's no crowd. Like, I mean, there's no crowd they're playing to. There's no actual, what's interesting is there isn't actually, other than a few references to religious nut and stuff. But tell you what, we're well into meaning now, and we're coming up on, like, we've got 15 minutes left. So first, before we get into meaning, and then we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you, Brian. Because, yeah, we're not talking about the story anymore. We're talking about the meaning of the story. Why don't we talk about what's going on next week, Jim? What are we doing next week?
Well, we are following up on our parking lot reaction to Nope, the new Jordan Peele movie. And just I saw it again. I didn't know if I told you that, but I dragged my family out. And my son's girlfriend even came with us, and we all went it. And when we came out, there was a thunderstorm, which was really weird. So of course, I ran to the car and I acted like I was watching the clouds. Anyway,
fantastic.
Which the family, I prompted them. I said, "Did you see what I was doing?" And none of them were impressed. But anyway, great. And I picked up on a few other things too. So still super enthusiastic about it.
I'm definitely gonna watch it again. Have you guys have seen it, haven't you? I believe you've done reactions to it.
Yeah, a little thing of note too. The breaking news reporter in the middle of the film who pops up is like the only reporter that's out there, and when she does the breaking news, I actually worked with her at Channel 3 here in Las Vegas.
Wow.
Maybe you mentioned that on.
So I was sitting there in the screening going, like, watching the film, being really, and it was a great film. And I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like, Hetty! And everyone kind of looks at me like, I know her.
Connection. That's awesome.
So Hetty Chang, very good reporter, and she does a great job doing the breaking news TV reporter thing in Nope. So
that's very cool, man. Yes, and I remember you messaging me on that, I think. You commented on it in our on our parking lot reaction. I remember you saying this, but thanks for bringing it up again.
Well, it was funny because she was the reporter that I did the interview with when we interviewed Senator Obama.
Very
in
cool.
the 2008 primaries.
Yeah.
So it's sort of funny. Like, of the three of us, one ended up as two-time president of the United States. One of them ended up as a reporter in Los Angeles, and I'm on a podcast.
Well, we're so
I think I'm having the most fun though out of the
Yes.
three of us. So
Damn fine podcast here.
good recovery there, Brian. And I'm on well with you losers.
I'm getting yelled at over Tron. I'm living my best life.
and I'm
Not
sitting there
yelling
going,
at
I hate
anyone.
Shakespeare.
I am pushing back. You're
with
all
your voice,
grown
yeah.
ups. It's not like you've never seen me before. All right. Let's get back to the movie we're talking about. But actually, you know what? First, maybe we should just say hi to the chat. Of course, they've been having a bit of an adventure. Actually, Matthew has been having a bit of an adventure, but he did mention the couple of things I wanted to kind of scramble through is he's wondering if Tron also influenced William Gibson's Neuromancer, or was that just part of the conversation? That's an interesting question from Matt, and we should let's put a pin in that and make sure we bring it up during the meeting. But I also, in reference to what you had said, Cody, about de-aging, this special effects and this visual effects hold up way better than the de-aging for the Clue character in Tron Legacy, where that took me out of the movie every time he was on. They should have went even further, just make him very plainer and digital, but no, it's all gonna be, I'll save more comments in my final thoughts. Okay. He had also mentioned talking about Metropolis, another classic silent era sci-fi metaphor flick, which would, I think, in some ways, there's quite a bit of overlap here. And that means it is time to get into the meeting. And yes, let's get back to Brian. I'll let you finish say your piece. And I can wait my turn for what I think it's about. But let me ask you this question before you get started, Brian. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to... let me ask you this question. Do you think it's a religious film, or at the very least, it's asking some existential questions? There's the line, early character, first act, going, if I don't have a user, who wrote me? Very... and I thought that was like kind of I noted it. Of course, shortly after that scene, it's, it literally cuts to meanwhile in the real world, like right there. And all I can think is Futurama with when they're arguing with the mutants in the sewers. And the mutant says, well, maybe you're just in a sewer system for even higher level people, And Bender goes, nope, real world, blue sky and everything. We're at the top. Anyway, I throw that question to you, Brian, as you talk about the themes you think it's diving into, what the movie's trying to say.
Well, I think it wasn't so much a religious thing. I mean, I think it was a religious subplot, but I think it was more about the trying to give the audience who doesn't really know computer programming much at that point. I think it was trying to give, like you were saying, the two different layers of reality, but also trying to get people to understand what programs are, and if programs were sentient, what would be the god to them. So I don't think it was a heavy theme in the film, but I do think it was there as far as, like when they introduced the being pulled into the gladiatorial games, the computer's like, well, I'm an accounting program.
Yeah.
I teach people when to buy and when to sell. Why am I here in a gladiatorial game sort of thing? That, and then the Bruce Brocksleitner character, yeah, sure.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
the whole thing of, yes, he talks to his god when they do the thing in the sky beam, but I really thought it was more about the ancient Rome kind of gladiatorial games thing. To me that was the overarching thing with a little bit of religion in there, but overall it was more to that to me.
So what would you say, what do you think the movie is about? What is its main message?
It's a little bit about future. It to me, it's about being wary of the future and being wary of computers. And are the AIs going to come and get us? It's which is one of the earliest examples I can think of not being completely science fiction, but science future more than anything. Because you can look back to 1984 and all that kind of stuff from way back, but early 80s was when we were first going into the era of, oh, okay, so computers are here. They're not just like big things in big magnetic tape things where NASA has them. They're actually computers in a room somewhere, and people are actually making video games, and kids are playing those video games in arcades downtown. So I think to me that was sort of the future beware. It's not that far in the future that we're going to have AIs out there that could theoretically come and get us.
So
Which
you would say,
and then to think
no, I'm going to,
Terminator was 2 years later. So
yeah. Well, and I was
kind of picking
thinking
up
of
on the theme.
Terminator, and that definitely has a pessimistic view. By then the 80s is accelerated. A lot of automation has destroyed a lot of jobs. Going through that 80s recession, the high interest rates, all these other things that are causing a lot of insecurity. The threat of nuclear war kind of reaches its peak, that fear of total destruction. So would you then say, and I'll ask you this, but this is a question for everybody here. Would you say in the end, is this flick hopeful, future positive, or it's also a pessimistic film a la The Terminator? Or let's say The Matrix,
I think it's
going later.
I think it's trying to put a positive spin on it, but it is a cautionary tale.
Okay. Cody, what do you think this movie's about?
I think kind of what Brian was saying about how like cautionary tale, I think is a good way of saying it. It's not saying, oh, computers are bad and they're gonna come kill us all in the future and set off nukes and everything. It's more of like hey, this is this new thing that we're all getting used to. It's it kind of a novelty still at that point where it's not in every household, so to speak. So it's getting used to this new idea that this computers are coming into our homes. They're creating entertainment, but they're also automating things, making our lives easier, but also
Becoming
how much
interconnected.
yeah, like maybe how much is too much when it comes to computers. Can they do these crazy advanced things? And then of course, see, I think also because it is under the Disney label, it's not going to go completely pessimistic, be like, the world is dark and scary and we're all going to die. It's more like,
You've seen
hey,
The
this.
Black Hole, right? Like,
No.
yeah, same
It's free on the
studio,
Disney Channel.
and that was a dark fucking movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. See, I think it's kind of one of those just like, hey, it's just taking advantage of a new technology, trying to give a little bit of a cinematic spin to it. And I think ultimately we're not quite to the pessimistic part of technology's changing and computers and AI are going to become an issue if we're not careful. It's more like, oh look, it's here, it's happening. What'll happen next? We don't know.
It's interesting you guys talk about that. Looking at it from, let's say, a 2020s perspective, especially not growing up in the era it came out. One of the producers, he was quite clear. He's like kind of, he really thought of it as, well, an authoritarian government versus more of democracy. That PCs were, and this was a lot of the blah, blah, blah of the time. With a PC, the power of a computer is in your home, not by big business or the government. And so,
I
and
mean, there was a
definitely,
big corporation in the movie too, right?
yeah, well, that the idea, well, and crushing an entrepreneur, some
Yeah. So
nobody
there's a corporate.
crushing an entrepreneur, right? Although he
Yeah.
becomes the big corporation. Well, none of these things are ever perfect, right? But
Yeah.
the producer was really clear that that he saw it as a metaphor for, you know, democracy versus authoritarianism, which is all about, well, master control program, central control, have to get permission, no innovation, you know, very much an 80s idea of, if you don't let your creative types do their thing, in the end, it'll all just be centrally controlled and no one can do anything. Which fit Reagan era rhetoric to a T about the evil empire. Speaking of imperial ambitions and imperial fears, you know, of the Soviet Union at the time and that. So it's interesting you guys talk about it that way. Jim, what would you say, given what Tron is as a character, are we talking propaganda?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, this sort of reminds me. I'm gonna flip the recent rhetoric a little bit. Only a good guy with a computer program can stop a bad guy with a computer program. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it is kind of pessimistic in that it hinges on good people like I'll say, you know, Clue and Tron,
Yeah.
like Bruce
Freeing
Brock's
the
Lightner's
system.
character, freeing the system. If they were not so noble, I mean, I think, you know, the whole situation there at Century City or LA or wherever it was would be in a lot more trouble. But in a way, yeah, it's sort of about control. And, you know, if the good guys are in control, we're all good.
It never asks who
no.
watches the watchers, though. It really
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
Well, Tron will watch and we'll all be fine.
Yeah. It's sort of, you know, and there's a little bit of pessimist archive about it too. It sort of reminds me of the line in Simpsons where Professor Frink says, "Hey, in 20 years, computers will be so large and expensive, only the 5 richest kings in Europe will be able to afford one." and so, you know, obviously not accurate, but there's a lot going on here, and it's obviously early days, but, you know, in a way too, it's kind of interesting because there was like one line I thought, boy, they're pretty cynical about the business already. Dillinger says at one point, "You've seen one CES show, you've seen them all." This is in early 1980s. It's still going on. I thought, holy cow, was that line from the future? But in any case,
but I'm not even, like, it's great. I didn't even get it then because I was 15, right? But I now kind of go, is that actually cynical? Is that just a good line of, fuck, these things are all the same. It doesn't matter every year. Yeah, everything changes, but it's still, look at our new whiz-bangy thing.
Yeah.
Have a free drink. Here's some swag, you know.
Yeah.
They could have really hit it if he came in and he has a bag of crap that he's like gives to some underling or master control.
Yeah, exactly.
Something pops out that's like, can you just deal with this?
Exactly. Hey, kid,
Take
you
my
want some
swag and, I don't know, ship it off.
Coasters? The girls are that way, you know. Anyway,
that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned girl. For me, I vehemently disagree with the Brian, with your take on it. I do, and actually even kind of the pessimistic thing. I think these guys, I think it's a future positive film. It's showing it's very heroic and positive, and no, you know what? With the right people, they will persevere over these boring stiffs who have no creativity. They can't think out of the box. The religiosity, I think that just comes with not just a Disney movie, but a movie of that time. You know, that there's going to be a little bit of that. It's 1982. It's not being questioned like it does, or it is nowhere near as sensitive an issue as it is now. And so it's not really a big theme. It's more of I think, just an opportunity for the writers. It shows more an unintended theme. It kind of gives us a window on how people in general were thinking at the time. That said, yeah, I think it's a future positive film. It really does. It looks at PCs as this is the democratizing force, and we'll all be creative innovators. We'll all be programmers. We'll all be advanced decades later. As you said, Brian, you know, people who are learning C++ in high school, they go to get a grinding job, making apps or working for ABC Inc. There is this thing that was supposed to change everything, changes everything, but not much really changes. You know,
Well, it just struck me that the Matthew Broderick movie War Games came out
Yeah.
the year after this, and the Super Bowl, the Apple Super Bowl commercial where the sprinter runs into the you know, and then throws the thing up at the screen was the year after that. So it is sort of a recurring theme in the early mid 80s of, you know, computers are coming, but they're here. And, you know, yes, there is that danger of future, whatever, but we as the people can still stand up to our computer overlords, the MCP.
Well, I don't even think, like, it's interesting. The MCP doesn't even, in this film, it's at best implied that it will take over the real world. Like, it's barely, you know, we see a little bit of that when Dillinger's going, hey, I can still do things, and the MCP is blackmailing him. But it doesn't seem to really hit hard on that existential threat, because it's going more for a bit of a swashbuckling adventure through a digital realm, you know, where we have Flynn, and there's Tron and Yuri, and that is the thing I want to end on this, guys. If you look at Yuri / who is she, who does Cindy
Laurie.
Morgan play? Laurie, thank you.
Yeah.
If you look at the way that there's the way she plays the character in the world, but also her character outside of the world. Whereas you have Olivia Wilde's, what was her character?
Oh.
Cora.
Oh.
Thank you.
Oh, good one, Cody.
Yeah. You know what? I am wondering, this is the way I felt. I was like, wow, this is another movie, interestingly enough, with Cindy Morgan again, where I'm like, they're presenting women in a way better, a way more nuanced way than the movie 3 decades later. Like Olivia Wilde, and this is not to knock Olivia Wilde's performance, but it's almost like, well, to make women equal, we'll give them the opportunity to kick ass. But all the women in that film, or virtually all of them, are fetishized in some way, shape, or form. Like, and she's this gamine, innocent, mature yet innocent, and she, you know, fawning over the men, like just that kind of, you're amazing. I found it. It's like, I found that a real clash when you see Cindy Morgan's portrayal of this woman it's like, I think that's a woman I could possibly know at my old corporate job, you know, who is certainly in no way presented as unfeminine, but at the same time, it's like, no, that's a woman at work. I buy that. Now, Cindy Morgan in an interview did say that she played Yuri in a more innocent way because she's innocent of the outside world and is somewhat fascinated by Flynn because Flynn's that cool kid from the States, and she's just been used to Canadians. Look at that teenage, and he rides a motorcycle, a la My American Cousin, which is a Canadian film about a girl's crush on her American cousin.
Well, but also keeping in mind too that this is a Disney movie, so she's basically there just so that she can be kissed towards the end of the film. She's a little bit of like Canadian.
Wait, which are we talking?
Cindy
Yuri?
Morgan in
I disagree with that.
In real life and in the computer world, I found her showing up right when they needed the swashbuckling hero, as you say, to have someone to kiss towards the end of the film. Like,
disagree completely.
Victorious, I kiss her, and they kiss her.
Disagree completely.
Well, and she has a role in she actually is a creator and inventor, as in the laboratory too,
and
so
is needed as a helper. Yes, is she one of the leads? No, but she is she has more to do than just get picked up and kissed. She is the one, as it seems like, almost part of can you call it the rebellion, or the resistance, but one she is the one who brings Tron to the wise old man connector psychopomp guy, and it's her who convinces him to let Tron pass. She has stuff to do beyond just getting kissed. I'm not saying that wasn't part of her job, and again, I'm not saying that she's great, or that this is a perfect portrayal compared to shit in Tron Legacy, but I am saying that I do think it was more nuanced a portrayal than it is in Tron Legacy, where it's fetishized. Even remember when he's put into warrior clothing and the not even spandex, the latex comes out. It's like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Pretty
and
corny,
They had one shot in the trailer too that they made sure to, show that one off.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of I was just surprised that again, it's 1982. It's not some great a great portrayal, but it is, I think, better than what came out in, what was it, 2012 when
2010, I think.
2010 when Tron Legacy came out. I thought it's like, wow, there's actually a little bit of regression. Yeah, hidden behind the fighting.
Yeah.
She's innocent.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like a little creepy.
I have
young
question.
man, show her the way.
Before I forget, a little bit of question for you guys, not necessarily about meaning. Do you get the impression that Disney learned from the black hole what to do and what not to do? I kept thinking about that because this is only a few years later, and this one delivers a lot better than the black hole did.
That's a great question. Can we put a pin in that? I think we're wrapping up on meaning. It's time to move forward, but I think that's the perfect question.
I just wanted to table that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Jim. First of all, though, let's take this off. Let's take this off and say hello to the chat again and see what Matthew's been. Let's see what Matthew's been up to. Bear with me. Kind of scanning through here. Oh, okay. Example of a good future, positive computer future. As Isaac Asimov's The Bicentennial Man, which I think is an underrated film. Have you guys seen it with Robin Williams?
No,
Yep.
I haven't actually.
Yeah. I love that movie.
It is, eh? Like it. Yeah, it's a sweetheart. Okay, so Bicentennial Man And The Last Question from 1956. I do not remember that. Matthew, you know what? If you wouldn't mind even like throwing in a bit of the log, like the log line of that, and at Rob Christensen, so I see it, and I'll point that out. Oh, here's a question for you guys. Would you consider the episode Hang the DJ from the Black Mirror being similar to the ideas of Tron? And I think that's more, I find this a lot more a positive film, but that may be for you, Brian, and you, Cody, actually.
You know, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but I hear good things about Black Mirror, but I've never watched a single episode of the show, which I need to start watching it. But I've heard a lot about it, but I've not seen that show or the episode.
Be ready to be bummed out. I mean, good. I'm not saying it's a bad, but yeah.
Yeah.
You'll never get the end of an episode go, fuck, that was some awesome television.
Like, oh, technology's scary.
Okay. Cody, what do you think of that? Are you familiar with Black Mirror?
I'm kind of on the same wavelength. Never
Uh-oh.
seen the show, but I get the gist of it. You know, kind of takes the concepts of technology and portrays it in a less than stellar light, and kind of plays into horror and psychologically screws with you. So in that vague regard, Tron's definitely way more positive. So that's really all I can say.
I think, you know what, we'll have to come back to that. Like I never saw that episode. The few episodes I have seen that I could get through were bummers, but I think it's not just, they're not as much critiquing technology as how we seem to, as human beings in human society, inevitably apply it. We're not, we're forever, we don't seem to be properly equipped to use well what we've created. That we are forever inventing something and then say, we have a million ways we can apply this to our lives. What are the 10 worst? Let's do it.
Skynet.
Yeah. Whereas, and maybe I've stumbled onto something here with this film. It may depend on the good guy with a computer program, but it does have this idea that these human creations will inevitably serve humanity. I fight for the users. Okay. Where are we here?
Well, even
It is
Ram's
funny,
little
though, you know, you say that as we're now in an era though where we have self-driving cars. I mean, they legally have self-driving cars driving up and down the strip, so the Las Vegas Strip. So it is sort of interesting how we're now in that era and we're letting computers, artificial intelligence, drive cars on public roadways. So
well,
it's
you
not
guys
quite
are.
there yet.
Yeah.
They can only really go straight, and even then, there's got to be some human intervention there.
I strongly suspect this is why I'm not as worried. So that thing over there is, I'll be making my money tomorrow. I'll be doing some voiceover. Of course, there is a big fear in the voiceover scene about automated AI voices, and you can even, for $35, I can, US dollars, I can pay Descript, and they will create a digital version of my voice where I can just type in the words and it'll sound pretty close to me. Here's the thing though.
It's cold and clinical.
It's not even cold and clinical. At times it's like, that's a question. You're not, there is
not the proper inflection there.
You're missing the beat. Or so when somebody hires me to read, to deliver a voiceover. They're not just getting the voice, they're getting a storyteller. Not some amazing storyteller. I am in the bottom third of the market. The top of the bottom third, but the bottom third.
Is that the title of your autobiography?
I think it'd be a great...
The upper lower
it'd be
class.
a fucking awesome... Well, and I have once said I've had a couple of orders, files, briefs, where I'd say, boy, this is firmly in the bottom of the middle third. So I'm moving up. Anyway, I think of self-driving cars. There's a magic kind of complexity point where I'm really not that worried about it. I'm not actually worried about self-driving cars going beyond what they are reaching now. Maybe a bit better. I could see more about self-driving, almost self-driving trains, a thing now. Self-driving subways, a thing now. Stuff where the rules and the structure is so rigid that it's really performing actually a pretty simple program, but that there's a cap on their capability to handle a level of complexity that our human brains, as ridiculously crappy at certain things, are terribly good at because of millions of years of evolution. And I think about a perfect example is for as huge a data set as Amazon has on my ass, how it will, you search for one thing, you buy the thing, and for the next 6 fucking months, it's still trying to sell me that thing. 6 months is a bit of an exaggeration, but it's like, these things aren't as sophisticated as we want to believe they are. And so, yeah, I think that's, I don't know how I even got on this fucking tangent. Sorry, gents. Artificial cars. Going back to that, Brian. Yeah, we do have a sort of artificial car, but how is that related to this?
Well, we have, even in our homes now, if you just say, "Hey Alexa," or "Hey Siri,"
there might be people that are now going, "Son of a bitch, he had to say it."
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
on our cell phones. I mean, we have these.
All I'm thinking is I'm glad I have headphones on it, because he's gonna say Google.
And we're not just saying, "Hey Google." We're saying a specific humanized name for an AI that's built into the Google product. We're not just saying, "Hey Google." We're saying, "Hey Siri," or we're saying, "Hey Alexa."
Yeah.
So it's and you're right. There is that fear of being automated out of existence, and to a certain extent, my old job as a TV news photojournalist has been largely automated out of the business, because now they have people that are both reporter and photographer because the gear has gotten so light. I mean, I'm talking to you now on a Canon M50, which I bought for $600, and it's not professional quality, but it is prosumer, and the bottom, the relatively cheap part of the market, the quality has risen up to the point where it's not professional quality, but it's close enough that people don't really care as much.
Yeah.
So
or may not even notice.
Things that can be automated will be.
Yeah. I think
slowly over time. But.
Yeah. I just think that idea that we will no longer, that it's going to do all the thinning. Like, how often? I like the, hey, insert name here. I do like that feature, but it's pretty regular that I can't answer that. I can't do that right now. I haven't been able to do that for quite some time. You think somebody would make it happen. I'm not as, I have a healthy amount of skepticism over AI's abilities, or the promise of AI in part because if Elon Musk thinks it's going to happen, I'm like, well, I can bet against that. My money is going to be safe. This guy has come through on nothing ever. But that's a different podcast.
Well, even he had
Different
buyer's
movie.
remorse over Twitter.
Well, it's more, damn it, they're calling me on my bullshit again. Jesus, I might have to pay for this fucking thing. Okay, guys, let's get back to the movie. And really, I guess, you know what? We could talk about the director, whether the director passed or failed. But let me ask you first, and it's a yes or no. Does it hold up? Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Brian?
Was that too quick?
Yeah, no. Brian?
Yes. Yes, it holds up.
Cody?
2 Academy Award nominations, by the way.
Yeah.
It still
Oh,
holds
yeah.
up.
Oh, interesting tidbit. It was denied a nomination for special effects because the Academy at the time thought they cheated using computers for part of it.
How ironic.
It was best sound and best costumes that it was nominated for. So
Wow.
Um,
Costumes are good.
Yeah.
it was a well-made movie.
Well,
Uh,
and nothing looks goofy. Like, you
well,
know,
wait,
there's
let me-
no Zardoz moment.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jim. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, this held up way more. This was one of those ones I was nervous about watching, and I'm like, God damn, this holds up well. It is of its time, and I think that's a great thing, actually. Going back to when we were talking about historicity and you guys talking about selling the time, and it's like, well, it didn't have to sell shit. It was made in 1982. It is such an early 80s movie. It should be in there with John Hughes for, hey, you actually want to know what people were thinking about in the 80s, what they looked like in the 80s, et cetera, et cetera. This is a movie you should watch because it is so, I think it did capture the zeitgeist. It should be talked about more than it is. Anyway, let's get back to the regular program. The director. Jim, does Mr. Lisberger pass or fail?
Oh, pass. Yeah, a lot of vision here, I think, and that's always fun when a guy's swinging for the fences, and he connected pretty well, I think.
Brian, would you
I
give him a pass?
yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting to note too that he only has 5 directing credits.
Yeah.
And the last one is
Right?
in 1989.
Mhm.
Yeah, he only has 5 directing credits, and I believe 2 of those are, well, one of them's a short, and the final one is called Slipstream from 1989, which I didn't recognize. The only one that I really recognized that came after Tron was Hot Pursuit, which I have not seen, but that was a John Cusack
I
movie,
saw
so
it.
totally 80s, 1987. Yeah, but yes, so 5 total credits. One of them is a short from 1973, but yeah, he had 4 features come out in the 80s from 1980 to 1989. So
That Hot Pursuit was like, there's like a mini genre of John Cusack in the 80s chasing after a girlfriend who's far away.
Yes. Yeah.
This was
And
not
Walking in
the
the Rain at some
better
point.
of the 2 or 3 of those movies he made in like 2 years. Interesting note here, guys. Lisberger started his career, decided to go into animation in school back in Boston. I'm going to F that up. In Boston, and actually was heavily influenced by heavy metal. Mobius worked on some of the storyboards they did for this flick, but he had done built his own animation studio, had to move out to LA because he ran out of workers for a couple of things he was doing for the Olympics, and had been thinking about Tron, doing some of the early concept art when the 1980 Olympics happened, and of course the invasion of Afghanistan, and Carter's part of the response to the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan was not participating, like boycotting the Olympics. So all of a sudden their second movie kind of falls, disappears. They got to do the winter one. They didn't get to do this one, but they were a bunch of weirdo hippie. Well, maybe that's a little much, but you see some of their work and it's like, whoa, that's pretty trippy. They were artists who came out to LA and then, well, let's make this Tron thing. They'd been thinking about it, needed a studio, and Disney, not being the big deal it once was, and certainly not what we're thinking of now, fell in love with the idea, which is fascinating to me. Anyway, Cody, pass or fail for Mr. Lisberger?
Pass. Ambition, creativity, all across the board. I'll always commend a director for doing that.
Yeah, I agree completely with you guys. Yeah, this was, I like the way you put it, Jim. Swing for the fence. And I feel he connected. Yeah. You know what?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not a home run, but stand-up triple.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
And how well it holds up to this day, too. I mean, when you consider that War Games was the year after, and I believe that The Last Starfighter was the year before. I think that was 1981. I love those films, but they're very of their time technologically and CGI-wise. So the fact that Tron stands up as well as it does, and granted, they probably had a bigger budget, but to me, that goes totally to the creativity of the director. And
yeah.
I promised Rob I would show this off. This is my
all right.
Hey Jim, Bruce Boxleitner, Tron in bracket. And then it says at the very bottom, Alan Bradley, Tron in Tron. Anyway, so that's I went on a bit of an autograph spree years ago, and that was one of my gets. The guy's super handsome in real life. I kind of went, holy crap, and he's like 60 now or whatever, but very, very charming.
Well, look at him in Tron Legacy.
Yeah.
Even now, like silver-haired fox or what, eh? Like
yeah.
Yeah. Well, he married Laura Ingalls Wilder. He married Little House on the Prairie. So he has to be a good-looking guy.
Well,
he's marrying Sarah Gilbert.
Well, at the same time, no creepy stories coming out. Like no, like, oh, that's icky. It's like,
yeah. Just working actor, yeah,
working actor doing his thing. Again, gents, another documentary. If you've got Disney Plus, folks, go into the extras. There is a little mini documentary of Lisberger and his son going through photos and that. And I think it was part of an effort for. It may have even been part of a Tron Legacy promo or something, but it's really cool. It's about 15-20 minutes, and really it's just a fascinating thing. I think coming back to what you had said, Brian, about his, like, Jesus, no credits, but it sounds like he was a producer, and like that's where his track went, and maybe just not that into keeping his IMDb page up, but it's still around LA, around Hollywood. I wouldn't be surprised if you dig a little deeper. He's also helping weirdo, maybe Ralph Bakshi made some, helped Ralph Bakshi or something. But yeah, he does have a.
It is interesting to note too that he has a writing credit for the characters for Tron 3. Which is apparently scheduled to come out in 2025. Yeah. So,
too bad they can't get him to just direct. Well, mind you, he's a million years old now, so okay, that's not really fair.
Born in 1951.
Yeah, million. Okay, yeah he's in his 70s.
He's older than us, so he's a million.
He's a lot older than us. Like, he's almost older than us, Jim, to a level upon which he can go, I don't know, what are you, 50 or 30? You're younger. You're a kid. Which makes me feel very young at 55. That crazy old man. And there's Cody going, oh my God, I'm surrounded by the ancients. And
Council
the
of
references
Elders.
of reading the original
Yes.
texts.
Cody's like, all of these people were born in a separate millennium.
Yeah.
Well, you were born
So
in the
was
late
I. The
90s,
fuck you talking
weren't
about?
Yeah. He's got both feet firmly planted in the 20th century. The rest of the body's in the 21st.
Precisely.
All right, guys. I do want to here just a sec here. I want to quickly go back to the chat. I asked and Matt delivered. The last question shows 7 vignettes going from 100 years into the future to thousands to millions to billions to trillions of years in the future, where people ask a computer to solve entropy. Ooh, swinging for the fences there.
Yeah.
And each time period, the technology has solved a problem. In 100 years, it's made solar power replace oil and nuclear and power spaceships in the solar system. In thousands of years, the computers have solved the hyperspace jumps and has allowed humans to colonize the galaxy. In millions of years, I'm not going to read anymore. I think this is... I will find a link to the story, to the book, and... I'll put it in the description. I'll pin a link to it in the first comment when I republish this video. Thank you very much, Matthew. All right.
Thank you.
Gents, again, thank all three of you for chiming in on this classic. And I think it can be called a classic, eh? Would you guys agree?
Oh, yeah.
It's got its following, yeah.
Yeah.
And it is worth noting too. I loved David Warner's performance as the Klingon High Counselor in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, and it is worth noting too that also from Star Trek VI, Nichelle Nichols just passed away too. So
yes, yeah,
yeah.
So
interesting
many.
watching.
No, so many in the last 2 weeks. Veteran performers. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, good point. Good point.
Look at this. Matt is providing a link in the chat. Where is it? Oh, you know what? It might not come through, Matt. Fudge. And Matt's only 37. So it's a spry young man. Spry.
A child.
Okay. Going back. Next week, again, we are going to be looking at... Nope. Or as they say in Quebec, ben non. Which my friend Richard, who is in the chat, part of the Balmoral Street Research Irregulars, informed me is like of course not. More dismissive than I think nope is being in this, but thank you, Richard, for that translation. Not a transliteration, but an actual translation. Because, gentlemen, we have the best chat on the internet. All right, so with that out of the way, and Matt's going to put a link in the comment section. Thank you very much, Matt.
That's a good idea.
Really appreciate that. And so I think it's time to... how can I say this?
Talk about Bicentennial Man?
Put on our blazers and go to the... Put on our blazers and go to the arcade?
Yeah.
My missing joke.
Well, also, okay, you know what? Here's the, yes, that's, the other part was, it's like, yeah, I don't remember that many girls at an arcade.
Yeah.
Like,
Not in the
no,
80s.
they were
Or
kind of dirty places where...
that much lighting either.
No, don't. It's like, wow, a lot of girls there who think people who can play video games are popular.
Yes.
No.
Exactly how it was.
Alrighty. Okay, guys, I think we're reaching the, you know what, end of End of what, everybody?
End of
Oh.
line.
Thank you very much, my friend. That's right, everybody. It's end of line.
See y'all.
All righty. Meet you guys in the digital green room in a